Every single thing your life is right now, your relationships, your finances, your health, your career, your sense of who you are and what you are capable of, is the accumulated consequence of decisions, thousands upon thousands of them, most of which you made without full awareness of the psychological forces that were actually driving them, without understanding that the rational, deliberate, freely chosen decision maker you believe yourself to be is, according to decades of rigorous behavioral research, something considerably closer to a post hoc storyteller who constructs plausible narratives about why they chose what they had already been psychologically steered toward by forces operating entirely below the threshold of conscious awareness. And today, we are going inside the psychology of decision-making completely. Because understanding how your brain actually makes decisions is not just intellectually fascinating. It is one of the most practically powerful things you can do for every domain of your life simultaneously. Since every domain of your life is downstream of the quality of the choices you make within it. Let's start with the foundational discovery of modern decision science. The finding that earned Daniel Kahneman the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002, and that permanently changed how behavioral scientists understand human choice. Which is that the human mind operates through two fundamentally different cognitive systems that produce fundamentally different kinds of decisions. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional, associative, and effortless. It operates below conscious awareness, draws on pattern recognition and emotional memory, and produces the instant judgments, intuitive responses, and automatic behaviors that constitute the vast majority of the decisions you make in any given day. System 2 is slow, deliberate, analytical, and effortful. It is the rational, calculating mind you believe is making your decisions, and it is activated only for genuinely novel or complex problems that System 1 cannot resolve automatically, which is far less often than you think. The critical and humbling insight that emerges from Kahneman's research is that System 2 is not the supervisor of System 1. It is more like System 1's press secretary, the cognitive agent that constructs coherent rational explanations for decisions that System 1 has already made on the basis of emotion, habit, and pattern recognition. Which means that most of what you experience as deliberate rational choice is actually post hoc rationalization of an automatic, emotionally driven process that was completed before your conscious mind was even aware a decision was being made. Now, let's examine the specific psychological biases that most predictably corrupt decision quality. Because these are not random errors, but systematic, neurologically grounded tendencies whose effects are measurable, consistent across cultures, and catastrophically expensive across the span of a life. Confirmation bias. The brain's tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information in ways that confirm existing beliefs while systematically discounting contradicting evidence is perhaps the most pervasive and most costly cognitive distortion in all of human decision-making, because it means that the research you do before an important decision is not neutral fact-finding, but motivated confirmation of a conclusion your emotional brain had already reached, which means the most dangerous decisions in your life are the ones you feel most certain about. Because certainty is frequently the emotional signal of successful confirmation bias rather than the cognitive signal of thorough and balanced analysis. Anchoring bias. The tendency to be disproportionately influenced by the first piece of information encountered in a decision context, using it as a reference point that distorts all subsequent evaluation. explains why negotiations are so powerfully shaped by whoever makes the first offer, why the original price of a product so dramatically affects how good a deal any discount seems, and why the first salary number mentioned in a job discussion has an influence on the final number that bears no relationship to its objective relevance. Availability bias, the tendency to assess the probability and importance of events based on how easily examples come to mind rather than on statistical reality, is why people overestimate the risk of dramatic, memorable events like plane crashes and underestimate the risk of mundane but statistically far more dangerous ones like car journeys, and why the most recent emotional experience you have had in any domain distorts your assessment of that domain's future prospects far beyond what rational analysis would support. Understanding these biases is not sufficient to eliminate them. The research on debiasing is notably humbling in its finding that simply knowing about a bias does not reliably reduce its influence on your decisions. But it is the necessary first step toward the specific cognitive practices that do reduce it, the most effective of which is what researchers call consider the opposite, the deliberate, effortful practice of generating the strongest possible case for the conclusion opposite to the one you are currently inclined toward before committing to any significant decision, which activates System 2 processing in a way that creates genuine analytical competition for the System 1 conclusion rather than simply confirming it. Let's now look at the decision-making insight that is perhaps the most immediately and most broadly applicable across every domain of life. And that is the concept of decision architecture and its profound implications for behavioral outcomes. Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein's Nobel Prize-winning research demonstrated that the way choices are structured and presented, the default option, the ordering of alternatives, the framing of outcomes as gains or losses, has a larger influence on decisions than the preferences, values, and intentions of the decision maker, which means that you are being decisively influenced in your most important choices by the architecture of the environments in which those choices are embedded, usually without any awareness that this influence is occurring. The most powerful application of this insight for your own life is the deliberate design of your personal decision architecture. Structuring your environment so that your default choices, the ones that happen automatically when you are not actively deliberating, are the choices that align with your values and goals rather than the choices that undermine them. Because the research is unambiguous that defaults are overwhelmingly powerful in shaping behavior, and that the person who has designed their defaults thoughtfully will make better decisions under conditions of fatigue, stress, and cognitive depletion than the person of equal or greater motivation who is relying on in-the-moment deliberation to override a poorly designed behavioral environment. And here is the final and most important psychological truth about decision-making, the one that integrates everything we have discussed and points most directly toward the practical improvement of your decision quality across every domain of your life. The goal of understanding the psychology of decision-making is not to become a perfectly rational agent who has eliminated the influence of emotion, bias, and automatic processing from their choices. That agent does not exist and could not function if it did, because emotion is not the enemy of good decision-making, but an essential component of it, as Damasio's research on patients without emotional input to their decisions devastatingly demonstrates. The goal is to become a psychologically informed decision maker, Someone who understands which decisions deserve the slow, effortful, deliberately debiased analysis of System 2 and which can safely be delegated to System 1's pattern recognition. Who designs their environment to make their default behaviors the right behaviors? Who regularly examines their most confident beliefs for the signature of confirmation bias? Who considers the opposite before committing to any significant conclusion? And who applies the specific cognitive tools that behavioral science has now documented with sufficient precision to make them genuinely usable by any person willing to trade the comfort of unexamined certainty for the more demanding but infinitely more reliable foundation of genuinely examined choice? Subscribe for more mind secrets.